So the Saturday Afternoon Club was organized, as I mentioned, in 1891, and it grew out of, I understand, a reading circle. By the early 1900s, their membership had grown to the point where it was no longer practical to try to meet in an individual member's home. So they began talking about the possibility of a clubhouse. Now, I've read that it was someone local who chose to remain anonymous, who indicated that he or she would give a certain dollar amount. It was either $1,000 or $2,000 if the club members would match that by a specific date. They did. They went to work. They would have an ice cream social, a tea, a social event where what you paid went towards raising that money. And so, yeah, they got the money, they got the donation, then they incorporated, and they sold stock. And with the proceeds of the stock sales, they bought the northeast corner of Palm and Myrtle, and then they hired Arthur Benton to design a clubhouse for them. 2 stories in height. They said appearance, it was supposed to be Tudor. It looked like it was a collision between Tudor and Spanish colonial revival. Anyway, they then rented out the 2nd floor of the clubhouse. The local Masonic temple rented it for a while, and they figured out that by renting it, they could cover their mortgage payments nicely, and they did. So they basically came up with a down payment. I don't know if they bought the lot outright, but anyway, they got together enough cash to start the project, and then they found a cash flow that would allow them to service the debt and not have to dip into members' pockets to keep it going.
And then what did they do? What was their central purpose?
Education primarily. They would have, they had divisions. They would have a book division, a something division. They would study things. They would have speakers. They would arrange for what they considered would intellectually uplift the community in terms of their presentations. When they outgrew that clubhouse in the early 1920s, they bought the McKee House. I mentioned Myron Hunt was the architect. McKee was a banker.
And where is this house?
It is, alas, no more.
Where was it?
140 North Canyon. And it was replaced by some condos of questionable parentage. So they remodeled, they took over the clubhouse, they added on a large auditorium.
They took over the clubhouse? They took over the
McKee House and made it their clubhouse. Originally, the house faced south. There was a long driveway that began at Foothill and went north and landed in front of the house. So they reconfigured the access when they turned it into the clubhouse because that property had been sold. So you entered it from the east rather than the south, or the west rather than the south. And then on the north side of the property, they had an architect design a large auditorium that matched it in design. Colonial Revival, supposedly modeled after the house of John Hancock. So it's an imposing looking building. The inside there was a large, as you entered the hall, a large entry hall with a wonderful stairway that went up to a landing and then continued. Large living room on the left, dining room on the right, kitchen, pantry, etc. by hand. They had several bedrooms upstairs that were club use. One I think they turned into a club library. They also had an historical photo collection. And then a connecting area, and then you went into the auditorium, which was oval in size. Had a nice raised stage area and so forth.
Hmm.
It's where I took ballroom dancing lessons.
Really?
Yes.
What year?
Oh, probably about 1955. Yeah, that was when you were supposed, culture was when you learned how to do ballroom dancing. And we guys used to hide in the men's restroom until the dancing instructor sent someone in to flush us out and get us back on the dance floor. So as I say, Myron Hunt, I don't know if the plans survived or not. They might have.
And how long was it active,
Well,
the whole club?
It was active. The club disbanded in 1974, so they were active for 83 years, plus or minus, and had the clubhouse on Canyon for about 50 years, 50 of those years. At one time, there was a junior women's club for those women who couldn't meet at the regular time, and that clubhouse hosted lots of the events for the women themselves, but also for other organizations in Monrovia. First Old Timers Luncheon was held there in 1931. There are great pictures in the Legacy collection of people gathered on the front steps, William Monroe being one of them.
Who were the old timers? They were,
Well,
what
Myron,
did that mean?
okay. Myron Burr decided it would be great to have a get-together of those people who lived in Monrovia in the early days being the first 20, 25 years of its existence. So he organized it, sent out invitations, arranged all the particulars, and they had it on very close to, either on or close to Monrovia Day, in, I believe, 1931. And that was a tradition that continued for many years thereafter.
And Myron Burr lived where?
He lived in a house his father had constructed in 1893 on North Myrtle. He wrote out the specifications for its construction. And I thought, I wonder where this came from, until I ordered a book on the architecture of the Newsom brothers. And it had samples of their designs in the front. And in the back, it had sample specifications. And that's what Frank Burr did. He just used their sample specifications to write out what he wanted a builder to do for his own house.
What's the
which was
street
right.
address of his house?
150 North Myrtle Avenue. The house was owned by the Burr family for 80-some years. And then Myron Burr, who was the last of his immediate family, by that I mean his siblings, I believe, needed to go into, he was in his 90s or close to it, was in a care facility, and so the house was then sold.